So some of the challenges are actually, like I mentioned before, the story that I was working on mob justice, there were actually very few numbers. And because my task was to make this a data storytelling story, I had to find other spaces where I could get the numbers. So what happened in the piece, I went into the police records and found that there was only 1 year when those numbers were collected. And this is where you get the official statistics. So it's actually quite surprising that those numbers don't exist. But again, it's a larger problem. Do people think mob justice is an actual crime? And then secondly, what I did in that absence, I had to go and find, okay, are there spaces that are collecting dead bodies and recording how those bodies came into their space? Then I actually found that the morgues and the hospitals were actually having numbers. So it's then now trying to find the numbers that tell the story that became the interesting journey in the work. Actually, that's a really good question. How do you overcome those challenges? Well, first of all, you find alternative sources, because you must find credible sources that you can reference in your work. So, like I said, when I didn't find the data from the official government records, I went looking for other spaces where numbers of dead bodies are collected. So I found statistics from the hospitals and the mortuaries. Actually, and I did a deep dive also through going through the newspaper archives. And this is where I found that there were public notices put in the newspaper that actually told us how many bodies had been left out for collection. People were called in to come and collect them, and then be able to see even the distribution of these bodies all across the country. That was, or rather, all across the city, and seeing the urban and peri-urban spaces where this stuff was happening became also part of the story, because part of mob justice occurs within certain socioeconomic communities, certain economic clusters. So those stories, those data points where they existed actually were part of the story. And then I also made the absence of data part of the story, because it's really about what is our prevailing attitude around mob justice, and it's reflected in the lack of data collection. So yeah, so it's in a way like you find the numbers where you find them, but then you also reflect on the fact that no numbers exist, and what does that say? Wow, it's a lot of talking to a lot of people.
Okay.
So the collaborations occur in the same way any kind of storytelling is done, right? Rather, any kind of journalistic piece, you have to find your sources. Some of them is you're doing desktop research, you're reading other people's articles around the same matter. In my case, I was reading research papers on the topic, and they had done some really great research in advance, so I was able to include that in my work. But also it's talking to people in person. And so it's kind of like the universe of support that exists in producing a story. Yeah, so I was kind of leaning into that. So it's really just aligning with the way journalism works anyway.